Chapter 111. The Flame, 3. Don't use that. Sienna hated ignition. Hamel. You must be too stupid to know this, but cores are very delicate organs. People aren't born with them, they are artificial organs made by mastering mana. Therefore they are imperfect and come with many risks. Several times in his past life, Hamel collapsed from exhaustion after using ignition. Every time he did that, Sienna would sit beside him and nag all night. From the start, that technique could only be used by you. Do you understand what it means? You're an idiot, so you must think that just because no one can use the skill, it means it's some very special specialty. Well, in my eyes, it's a disability, not a specialty. Aren't you being too harsh? How is this harsh? I held back so many times. Thanks to you, we aren't in danger anymore, but you idiot. You're in danger now. What on earth are you doing? Look at you, just lying down on the floor and unable to lift a finger. You became a real idiot now. Whenever he heard these naggings, his fuse would snap and he would refute her. Still, Sienna always came down to the same conclusion. Yeah, you are an idiot. Do you get it, dummy? Never overload the cores. They are already too close to the heart, so why do you keep overloading them? Ordinary people. No, not just ordinary people. Even I, the greatest archwizard of humanity, would also die or become a vegetable if my cores were overloaded. I'm able to do stuff that even you can't do, so isn't it a specialty? Oh yeah. That's a specialty, alright. You're special. A special idiot with a special disability. Most of the time, Vermouth took care of the danger, but he wasn't a god. From time to time, the party would encounter dangers that even Vermouth couldn't deal with or times that he couldn't protect his companions. No matter how distinguished he was only one man. There was a limit to how much a person could handle on their own. That was why companions existed. Like how Hamel threw himself in front of his companions to protect them, everyone, Molen, Sienna, and Anise, did the same thing for each other. To make sure that Vermouth didn't have to do everything on his own, and in order to not get in his way, everyone tried their best. Hamel, that skill will kill you someday. Sienna wasn't the only one who hated ignition. It was Anise who revitalized Hamel's broken body after he collapsed because of the rebound from the skill. I am aware that you can control mana better than anyone. Sienna worries that you might die from mana overload. But I beg to differ. Hamel, you won't die from mana overload. Then what do you think? The human body is not as sturdy as human body owners think. When she said that, Anise didn't smile like she usually did. In his past life, Hamel was more scared of the serious Anise who didn't smile rather than the usual Sienna who cursed at him. Your body in particular isn't as sturdy as you think, Hamel. Had you been born with a brainlessly tough body as Molen did, I wouldn't even bother to warn you. What about my body? Hamel, you are born with the gift of mana control. But that gift didn't come together with a strong body. Hamel couldn't say anything back. Even in his past life he had realized that dozens, hundreds of times. When he was a mercenary he wasn't aware of this. Was his body fragile? No, that wasn't the case. Hamel's body was enough for him to mistake himself for a genius. Still, every one of his companions could be called a genius in their field. Molen's and Vermouth's bodies were so sturdy that it was almost embarrassing to compare himself to them. That technique, ignition. Not only does it overload the cores, but it also overloads your entire body, especially your heart. Sienna warned you about this several times. The cores are close to the heart. That's why mana overload is dangerous. Hamel, you overtax everything, your cores, heart and body. It's inevitable. Since I gained more power, it is natural for my body to endure more. Even a metal machine breaks down when it's pushed over the limit. And Hamel, you aren't a machine. Your body isn't made of metal. You must be aware of this too. No matter what kind of miracles I can perform, it's impossible for me to restore that which is completely broken. Hamel, do you understand what I'm saying? That technique will ruin your body. Actually, it already did. Someday your heart won't work like before and your body will refuse to move regardless of how much you want it to. Well, in a fight. No, not only in a fight, a person has to embrace risks to some levels in life. Are you a dimwit or an idiot? Do I have to pick one? Hamel, if you didn't act like a dimwit or talk like an idiot, then would I say stuff like this in front of you? Everyone thinks Molen is an idiot, but even he listens a bit when he is told to not do something. Why are you acting more stupid than Molen? Hey, that's a lousy thing to say. Anyhow, I warned you. If you become an idiot who can't even sit straight, then as a friend and a companion, I will arrange a room for you in the highest-class sanatorium of the Holy Empire. If that really happens, are you going to take care of my shit and piss? I will mercy kill you myself before that happens. Like that, he had heard so many warnings in his past life. That didn't mean he had hesitated before he used it. When the thought of "I have to use it" entered his mind, the situation was really so dire that he had to use it. And every time he used it, ignition played its role. It was well worth his body getting damaged. He overcame several crises. It was especially worth using it when he and Sienna got attacked during reconnaissance by Incarceration's blade, Gavid Lindman. If he hadn't used ignition, then he and Sienna would have died. Even in the Demon King of Incarceration's castle, he used ignition continuously. That was how he killed Incarceration's shield and staff. Then Hamel also died. Huh. Barong heard a heartbeat. That kid's heart beat too loudly. His bloodshot eyes worsened the terrifying feeling. The human's teeth were clenched shut, but they looked sharp like those of a beast. What did he do? Barong wondered. Barong didn't fully grasp the change in Eugene's body. After his reincarnation, Eugene thought about this multiple times. Even now, he would absolutely win if he used ignition. He would be able to definitely kill Barong. I can kill him. The cores were thus overloaded with mana. The fourth stars of the white flame formula fiercely rotated, the ring flame formula modified using the eternal whole. The 4 stars created one circle, and Eugene triggered a chain explosion of mana inside the circle. The ceaselessly exploding mana was refined into countless cores, which were then interconnected. The rotating circle of fire firmly held onto mana, preventing leaks. The white flame formula amplified the mana in the core, which allowed the mana to be used without waste. So that wasn't enough. No matter how much he amplified the mana, he couldn't amplify it more than the total amount of mana in his body. Eugene's heart kept beating as his cores were overloaded. The rotation of the stars got faster and faster. The operation exceeding his limit caused the cores themselves to contort. Boom, boom, boom. He kept blasting it, and as it burst, mana spread throughout his entire body. The distorted cores became bigger and bigger. Ignition purposely overloaded the cores. Like that, the skill spread the mana throughout the entire body after the explosion. As the flow of mana got intense, Eugene accelerated his heartbeat, overloading the entire body to adjust to the overheated cores. He felt the heat of the blood running through his vein. It was hot. His pulse accelerated until it felt as if his heart was going to burst. As he connected his internal energy to the environmental mana, he prepared his entire body for the next explosion. Putting his hand on his chest, Eugene had grabbed his heart. Only a couple of seconds had passed after that. But in those few seconds, Barang's perception of the child standing in front of him had changed drastically. Eugene's mana, which had begun to overload, pressured Barang. Bristling up his fur, he pounced on Eugene. A beastfolk's hand had 5 fingers like that of a human. However, popping out of Barang's fingertips were not the fingernails of a human, but the claws of a beast. The beast shot forward. With bloodshot eyes, Eugene watched Barang approach. He knew for sure that if he hadn't used ignition, he wouldn't have been able to follow Barang's movement. But now he could. Yeah. When Barang swung his claws right under Eugene's nose, Eugene made a judgment. I can kill him. Bang. Barang was the one who attacked. Barang was also the one who flew backward. He couldn't understand what had just happened. What had happened? Why was he the one thrown backward? Hadn't he attacked with his claws? Twisting his body in the air, Barang fixed his posture. The claws he had brandished were all shattered. Squirt. The moment Barang looked at his palm, it split open and squirted blood. Arf. His palm had been sliced. The cut was so deep that his palm was split into 2. Barang roared out of rage rather than pain. This kind of wound was nothing to him. Beastfolk's body regenerated the injuries in no time. Like Barang, the beastfolk who had accepted demonic power could regenerate like a high-rank demon folk. In fact, when Barang landed on the ground, the cut in his palm had regenerated entirely. However, Barang could not initiate an attack again. It was because Eugene was nowhere to be seen. Hamel, he is an animal, answered Eugene. Shouldn't you use the moonlight sword? No. The moonlight sword stood out too much. If he had to use it, then he would, but the situation was not dangerous enough for him to use the moonlight sword. I can win without it. Eugene felt the wind that WNYD created. Usually he would use this wind to push his body, But he didn't need to do so now. Eugene was faster than the wind, so fast that it couldn't catch up with him. His body was overloaded, but it was moving better than he had thought it would. It was much better than he had expected. It is definitely better than my body in my past life. It felt as if his arm was going to fall off. But it just felt that way. His arms did not actually fall off. Tempest. Eugene lifted Witty high in the air. How sturdy is this sword? With a low groan, Tempest raised the wind. A violent wind surrounded the sword. It will be able to handle your power without a problem. Is that so? Eugene showed a crooked smile. That's a relief. The sword, no, the storm plunged into the ground. Watching from afar, Christina had a strong premonition, so she embraced Signard. Whoosh. The divine power surged from Christina as she created a shining shield and protected the elves. The forest shook. The storm crashed into the ground, annihilating everything in its path. Wind spread from the eye of the storm, swallowing the nearby buildings. Ruhar. In the center of the storm, Barong howled as the wind mutilated his entire body. He couldn't feel anything in his left arm. The wind slashing from above had chopped it off. The attack only cost Barong a left arm because he had managed to twist his body and dodge the attack. You son of a bitch. As Barong howled, he drew out power. Dark demonic power wrapped around his entire body. Barong was strong. He was one of the most powerful of the beast folk, whose leader was Jagan, under the command of the Demon King of Destruction. Barong had snapped Bronze back with one hand, the back of someone who always bragged about being one of Shimuan's 12 finest. That was why none of this made sense. His arm was that sturdy, but it had been chopped off in a single strike. This power. Barong hadn't been able to defend against the attack because it had been too sudden. Eugene was a kid and a human, so Barong had taken him too lightly. However, Eugene was a Lionheart, the best human warrior family there was. It was inevitable that he had some cards up his sleeves. He realized that Eugene wasn't someone to be taken lightly, so from now on, it would be different. His mutilated left arm? That was also fine. He would regenerate it somehow. First, Barong planned on taking the kid out, tearing off his limbs and making him crawl like a bug to the elven sanctuary. He would then rape the Saintess in front of Eugene and kill her. He was also going to kill all the elves, every single one of them, and make Eugene shed tears of blood. After deciding what to do, Barong swung his arm. The dark demonic power turned into a giant claw and ripped the storm open. Eugene was standing outside the storm. Wrapped up in the demonic power, Barong lunged forward Eugene like a dark cannonball. He's nothing compared to Oberon, Eugene thought as he took a step forward. Even against Amelia Merwin, he's nothing. Whoosh. A clear blue flame rose up from his body and turned into sword force. I can't believe I have to use ignition to deal with this lowly bastard. As Barong ferociously charged toward him, Eugene sighed as he pitted himself. Even though I'm running, it's far, Barong suddenly thought. It was a dozen meters at most. He could get closer in a single leap. And yet, he felt as if he wasn't getting any closer. He felt a gap between Eugene and him. Barong didn't want to admit that. It wasn't that the distance was actually real, he just felt that way. The gap between the kid and him was so wide that Eugene felt miles away from Barong. But that couldn't be true. I have to reach him. No, Barong shouldn't. His instinct's warning filled his head. That can't be possible, Barong denied his instinct. He would die if he stepped any further. No way, he denied once again. I'm strong. Stubbornness prevented Barong from stopping. I am. He held out his hand and the demonic power dissipated. His claws cracked, shattered, and disappeared. His fingers and hands were cut into dozens, hundreds of pieces and scattered in the air. With eyes wide open, he watched his own body getting shredded. For Barong, everything was awfully slow and cruelly vivid. Barong came to a halt. He had no choice but to stop. Vomiting blood, Barong hung his head. His body was sliced open and blood and organs were falling out. He had reached out with his arm, but failed to complete the attack. Well, maybe his arm had served a purpose as a shield. If it hadn't, that terrifying attack from above would have completely shredded his entire body to pieces. You. Shuddering, Barong spoke. He was no longer able to stand and he simply collapsed. Who are you? Barong saw Eugene wrapped up in a blue and white flame. Eugene wore the flame like a lion's mane. In Barong's eyes, Eugene wasn't human. You know who I am. Eugene's tired eyes made him frown, but his voice was calm and composed. I'm Eugene Lionheart. Chapter 112. The Flame 4. There was no way that Barong didn't know his name. But even though he had just received confirmation from the man himself, Barong simply couldn't believe it. After all, how could he? The one standing up there right in front of him was a terrifying existence that seemed impossible to even touch. How could this person truly be a human brat who had yet to even become a full adult? There's no way, Barong denied the possibility through clenched teeth. You aren't Eugene Lionheart. Who in the world are you? Could you really be a dragon? This was the first time that Eugene had been subjected to such a misunderstanding. Eugene snorted and shook his head. Do I really look like a dragon in your eyes? He asked. Barong didn't reply. Both his arms had been cut off. His internal organs were also spilling out of his torn-up torso. However, Barong wasn't dead yet. Although his wounds were so serious that he wouldn't last long without treatment, Barong was still alive, refusing to die. But he was barely clinging on to his last breath. In such a state, was it even possible for him to overturn this situation? Was this all because he had been too careless? No. While that could have been held up as an excuse at first, now that things had turned out like this, carelessness alone couldn't excuse this result. Barong had done his best, but his best effort alone wasn't enough to narrow the gap between him and Eugene. Or rather, this mysterious opponent who had hidden his true identity behind the mask of the 19-year-old Eugene Lionheart. Big brother, Barong thought regretfully. He swallowed the blood that had surged up his throat. The long distance between the two opponents slowly decreased as Eugene calmly walked over to Barong. His pace wasn't fast, allowing each of his steps to ring clearly. Barong began to tremble slightly. Although he wholeheartedly denied that the person in front of him was truly Eugene Lionheart, he couldn't deny the terror that he was feeling. With each step that narrowed the distance between them, Barong's terror rose even higher. His instincts were telling him to somehow force himself onto his feet and get away from Eugene. Who gave you your orders? Eugene demanded. The effects of ignition weren't over quite yet. Though there was a limit on the skill's duration, Eugene still had enough time to take things leisurely. Big brother, Barong thought once more. Barong's trembling body hunched inward. While it was true that they did have a sibling relationship, Barong was afraid of Jagan. He wasn't alone in his fear of Jagan either. All the beast folk who followed Jagan were afraid of him as well. Jagan was the very incarnation of fear for all of the beast folk. That was just the type of person Barong's sworn brother was. His relationship with Jagan really wasn't all that impressive. As someone who had even personally killed his own biological father, how much value and sentiment would a man like Jagan place in a brother whom he didn't even share a drop of blood with? Barong was also well aware of this. No matter what happened to him, Jagan would feel no sympathy for him. He might even mock Barong for being weak. A brotherhood that they had sworn when they were both young and dreaming of a distant future together. Such a relationship wasn't of the slightest significance to Jagan as he was now. This has nothing to do with Jagan, Barong spat out with a scowl. This task wasn't done on Jagan's order. He is too busy to give the orders for such a trivial task. A trivial task, you say? Well, whatever, Eugene shrugged. So anyways, what were you planning to do once you followed me into the Elven territory? Barong revealed, my mission was just to confirm the existence and location of the Elven territory. Just a bit more. After I had confirmed that, I intended on returning after I killed you and the saint. If he could come just a bit closer. Even though you said that you weren't going to kill us? So in the end it was just a lie, Eugene scoffed. Barong kept his silence. In any case, who did you get those orders from? If it wasn't Jagan, was it one of the demon folk? Could it be the dark elves? Eugene speculated. Right when Eugene had taken another step closer, the color of Barong's blood that had stained the ground around them changed. The blood turned a dark color and sprayed up at Eugene. Without even waiting to confirm the result of this surprise attack, Barong clenched his teeth. The spilled blood and guts. No, Barong's entire body was consumed in a dark explosion. Both of his arms had already been cut off. Barong still had his teeth left, but he didn't see any chance of success in trying to charge at Eugene and sink his fangs into him. The best that Barong could do at this point was force his own body to explode and die together with his enemy. Sir Eugene. Christina's scream was swallowed up by a loud boom. The black explosion engulfed Eugene. With the distance between the two of them being so close, It was impossible for him to evade it. Though, there wasn't any need to avoid it. But the explosion wasn't able to surge past the point where Eugene had been standing. The moment that he died, Barang's eyes witnessed flames surge to life. Flames burning blue and flames burning white. The mixture of these two types of flames formed a huge barrier blocking off the blast. In the end, the explosion that Barang had created by sacrificing his own life wasn't even able to leave a mark on Eugene. Damn it, Eugene cursed as he shook his raised hand. Not a single trace remained of Barang's corpse. Eugene stared at the charred patch of ground that had been left as he placed Yi, which he had still been holding in his hand, back inside his cloak. Christina called out to him once more. Sir Eugene. Rushing over to him, Christina quickly grabbed Eugene's wrist. Then she placed her other hand on top of Eugene's racing chest as her brows furrowed. I shouldn't have let him die, Eugene grumbled. I had a lot of ways to make that bastard open his mouth. There were a lot of things that Eugene had wanted to ask Barang. The only method of interrogation that Eugene had learned in the past was torture. But now he had Christina with him. No matter how tightly Barang tried to keep his lips shut, Christina's holy magic would have been able to easily pull open his lips. No, that would have been impossible, Christina corrected him as she straightened her expression. That beastman was incomparably stronger and much more corrupt than the dark elf we interrogated previously. Had I tried to use an interrogation spell on him, he would have dissipated his own soul before we could even start listening to his confession. Even so, I shouldn't have let him die like that. Even if we weren't able to get him to open up, we might have gotten him to spill something once we started beating him up, Eugene said regretfully. Is your body all right? Christina asked, changing the subject. It's all right for now, but soon it won't be, Eugene replied. Huh? Christina asked, not sure what he meant. Eugene didn't feel the need to explain. His fingers dug into his own chest and used mana to gently stroke his heart. The overloaded core's heat slowly dissipated and his heart rate slowed down. Then came the recoil. Eugene's body shook violently. When it looked like he was about to collapse on the spot, Christina quickly supported him. Sir Eugene. Why are you acting like this so suddenly? Christina burst out in alarm. Eugene wasn't able to hear her voice clearly. His head was feeling dizzy and all the muscles in his body felt like they were being torn apart. His bones. No, even the very blood in his veins felt as if they were weighing him down. His cores, which had been exhausted by the overload, had now fallen silent. By this point, Eugene couldn't even draw out the strength needed to stay in control of his own body. Still, this is better than what I expected, Eugene thought to himself. In his previous life he had always lost consciousness after using ignition. Whenever he had opened his eyes after collapsing like this, he had heard all sorts of harsh criticism from Sienna and Anise. 1. Is it thanks to the fact that this body is stronger than my old one? The burden on his heart wasn't that heavy either. Even so, ignition still wasn't a skill that he could abuse. Eugene first needed to have the certainty that he would be able to kill his opponent no matter what. This skill also couldn't be used without having a companion nearby who could take care of his tattered body after Eugene was done killing the enemy. Christina quickly assured him, I'll cast a healing spell right. It's useless, Eugene cut her short. Although he said this, Christina still laid Eugene down on the ground and cast a holy spell over him. A warm light wrapped around Eugene's body. However, the aftereffects from using ignition couldn't be shaken off even with healing spells. There was no way to recover from an overworked core other than just getting enough rest. Isn't Anise going to show up? Eugene thought as he looked at Christina's back. But even with all the intense light pouring forth from Christina, Anise's figure couldn't be seen. About that fucking bestial bastard, Eugene said as he lay on the ground, clenching and unclenching his tingling fingers. He knew about you and me. Does that mean someone let slip the news about us? Christina asked, her face stiffening as she worked through the implications. After hesitating for a few moments, she continued speaking. The only ones who knew that I'd be coming to Samar are the Pope and Cardinal Rogerus. Are you sure? Although I'm not sure if they have told someone else, those two are the only ones that I sent my report to, Christina confirmed with a nod. Do you trust those two? Eugene asked as he looked straight at Christina. Truthfully speaking, Eugene was even prepared to get slapped in the face for asking such a rude question. On the one hand there was the Pope, the supreme leader of the Church of Light. On the other hand, there was a cardinal who was just one step below the Pope and Christina's adoptive father. It would only be natural for Christina to be furious at having these two be addressed with such suspicions. However, Christina didn't show any signs of being enraged. Instead of replying immediately, she only stared at Eugene for a few moments. Eugene couldn't clearly read the emotions that were buried in those eyes. However, he still got the feeling that the emotions were something other than anger. "What about you, Sir Eugene? If news about us has been leaked, then it isn't just the Holy Empire, but also the Lionheart clan that needs to be suspected, right?" Christina asked without answering his question. "There's no way that the Patriarch would do this," Eugene stated confidently. "He has no reason for doing so. However, if it's the head of the council, then I think he might be capable of doing something like this." Eugene was an adopted child who had proven himself superior to the direct descendants of the main line. No matter how much Eugene denied having any desire for the seat of the Patriarch, the Council of Elders would have no choice but to be wary of Eugene's ambitions. In fact, that wasn't the only reason why Doynes might have betrayed them. Eugene and Christina knew that there wasn't any corpse resting inside of Vermouth's tomb. The Lionheart clan's honor was something that had been passed down onto them from their ancestor, the Great Vermouth. If it was for the sake of protecting the clan's honor, then this could also be a convenient way of burying this shameful truth so that it would never be revealed. "How about you?" Eugene asked again. "Do you trust the Pope and the Cardinal?" After a short silence, Christina spoke up. "No, I don't." She continued in a subdued voice, "I can't trust those two. I can't figure out what reason they might have for doing this, but if they felt it was needed, they would even be willing to cooperate with the demon folk." Eugene was struck silent. "However, Sir Eugene, I also heard what that beastman said. He claimed that after we guided him to the Elven territory, he had intended to kill both of us. Although I can't really tell at this point if he was telling the truth or not. If that was the truth, then—" Christina hesitated before finishing confidently, "Then neither the Pope nor Cardinal Rogerus should have made a deal with the beast folk." "Is it because I've received the Holy Sword's recognition?" Eugene asked. "That might also be a factor, but the two of them also wouldn't want me to die like this," Christina said with a faint smile on her face. This wasn't a topic of conversation that would cause any amusement, so it was obvious that the smile was artificial. It was the same type of smile that Anise used to show whenever she talked about the Holy Empire so long ago. Anise had been strangely reluctant to speak of the Holy Empire. Even when everyone else was chatting about their past, Anise had just remained silent. There had also been a twisted smile on her face that was different from the one she usually wore. Right now, Christina looked exactly the same. After some hesitation, Eugene decided to ask. "Why not?" Christina refused to answer. "I feel like the relationship between you and me isn't deep enough yet for me to be willing to share such a story." "Fine then," Eugene mumbled as he stood up. Or at least he tried to stand up. He couldn't properly muster up the strength in his body, and even after gritting his teeth in effort, he wasn't able to bend his waist past a certain angle. At this sight, Christina's smile changed back once more to her usual one. She chuckled and then reached a hand out towards Eugene's armpit. "What the fuck are you doing?" Eugene cursed in surprise as he tried to twist his body out of the way. With amusement in her eyes, Christina asked, "What's with that tone, Sir Eugene?" "I'm just trying to support you. Don't lie to me." "You weren't trying to support me, you were trying to tickle me in the armpit," Eugene accused her. "Where in the world did you get such an idea? It's not like I'm insane, so why would you accuse me of trying to tickle you in the armpit, Sir Eugene?" Christina asked with a frown. Although her argument was reasonable, Eugene had clearly felt that Christina's fingers had been wriggling slightly as they tried to reach below his arm. There's no need to support me." Eugene finally gave in. "Just give me a hand so that I can pull myself up." "Would it really be all that shameful for you to place yourself safely in my hands without putting up such resistance?" Christina inquired. Eugene maintained a stubborn silence. "So you actually do have a cute side to you. It feels I haven't really realized it until now because of your usual words and actions, but looking at you now, you truly are younger than I am," Christina observed with a soft smile as both her hands reached out towards Eugene. "Now then, try not to feel ashamed and raise both your hands so that this big sister can pick you up. If you need an example, raise your hands like you're cheering." "You're mad because I accused the Pope and the Cardinal, aren't you?" Eugene insisted. "Not at all. Christina replied with a shake of her head. I don't feel any anger at being asked such a question. Because there is no reason for me to feel angry. Then why are you doing this to me? Why exactly are you harassing me like this? Eugene asked dramatically. Sir Eugene, do you know what the word karma means? Eugene played dumb. Sir Eugene, you have also harassed me on several occasions since we've entered this forest, and your harsh words have left their marks on my heart. Of course, I have never harbored any hatred towards you because of those actions, but if not at a time like now, when else will I get the chance to do whatever I want with you, Sir Eugene? Christina asked rhetorically. Eugene tightly squeezed his lips shut and stubbornly stuck his arms to his waist. In response to this, Christina directly grabbed Eugene's hands and spread them wide open. Eugene resisted with all his strength, but the way he was now, he simply couldn't overcome Christina's strength. You really are very stubborn, Sir Eugene, Christina commented. Judging from the condition of your body, even if I supported you, it would be difficult for you to walk. At least get a stretcher, Eugene murmured in embarrassment. Christina decisively rejected his request. No. There's no need for that. I can piggyback you myself, Sir Eugene. You're going to piggyback me? Eugene asked in disbelief. Yep. And just so that you won't fall or feel uncomfortable, I'll make sure to securely support your bum as well, Christina reassured him. Eugene's eyes were shaking in embarrassment. Was he really about to be piggybacked at his age? His rough past from when he had made a living as a hard-bitten mercenary in his previous life flashed through his head. Eugene decided that he thoroughly hated the thought of getting piggybacked by Christina. Yet, no matter how much he hated the idea of it, the state of his body made it impossible for Eugene to resist. Are you ready? Christina asked, not waiting for a response before swinging him onto her back. A bit higher, there we go. Now please hold on tightly to my neck. Eugene groaned. Don't you feel any shame? Why would I feel shame when all I'm doing is taking care of a wounded patient? Christina asked innocently. But does that mean that you're feeling ashamed right now, Sir Eugene? Eugene desperately kept his silence. Please don't forget this feeling. I hope that Sir Eugene will hold on to the experience of this day and use it to become a better person from now on, Christina cheerfully requested. Eugene clenched his trembling lips and bowed his head. The feeling of Christina's hand supporting his bum from below was truly hateful. Chapter 113, The Flame 5. Looks like I'm getting better all on my own, Eugene muttered to himself. Eugene had been on bed rest for the past 2 days. When he had first used ignition with the body from his previous life, he hadn't been able to move for a whole week. After that, he had used it a few more times and had slowly gotten used to the aftereffects, but the overload from using ignition had still taken him a whole 3 days to recover from, even at the point where Hamel could be said to have mastered it. It's faster than I predicted, Eugene thought to himself. Credit had to be given to the impressive quality of this body, but the main reason why the burden of overloading his body had been sharply reduced when compared to the experience from his previous life was because the ignition that Eugene had used was even more advanced than the one Hamel had come up with. First of all, the white flame formula was overwhelmingly superior to Hamel's mana training scripture. The ring flame formula, which incorporated the eternal whole on top of that, was even more advanced than the white flame formula, and it had even been specialized to an extent with the activation of ignition in mind. All his cores were connected into a circle. Then within that circle, further circles were continuously being created and then exploded. This part resembled what Hamel had done when overloading his cores. However, with the ring flame formula, this process was still at a level where Eugene had complete control over it without having to overburden his cores. With ignition, Eugene was then able to completely release all the limits of the ring flame formula. Although this act of overloading both the body and the cores at the same time was similar to his previous life's version of ignition, the actual method was much more refined than the one he had used in the past. The burden placed on my body is still dangerous, but I still feel like I'm holding up better than I was in my previous life, Eugene thought as he stroked the area over his heart, which was now beating at a regular speed. Of course, he still couldn't abuse this skill. Whether or not it was more sophisticated than the version from his previous life, it was still essentially the same technique that cut off pieces of his own flesh in exchange for power. However, there had been an unexpected side benefit to doing this. Eugene closed his eyes and concentrated his focus on his cores. Originally, Eugene's white flame formula had been stuck on the 4th star, But now the number of stars that were circling around his heart had increased by 1, bringing the total up to 5. Eugene could guess what the reason for this was. In order to make any advancements in the white flame formula, one couldn't just depend on increasing their total amount of mana. In addition to that, they also needed to increase their understanding of mana by going through various challenges and experiences. Despite having the memories of his past life, Eugene had still needed to take the time to diligently increase his total mana capacity. The Samar rainforest was rich in mana and could even be compared to the average ley line. Having deliberately depleted all of his mana, and with how overloading his cores had allowed them to experience handling greater quantities of mana, this experience had allowed him to successfully split off another star. As long as I make good use of this skill, I can even use it as a shortcut to speed up my growth. Eugene rubbed his chin as he fell into thought. Making advancements after overloading his cores. In a way, it was similar to a training method used to rapidly put on muscle. This training method involved deliberately overworking the muscles to the point of tearing them so that they needed recovery. The more the muscles were torn, the stronger they grew back. 1. Eugene imagined, by using ignition a few more times, won't I be able to make quick progress in the white flame formula? Although he gave it some thought, Eugene soon realized that any repeated attempts wouldn't turn out as effective as this first time using it. In order to promote the growth of a core by overloading it, he would need to keep putting a higher load on it every time. In the course of fine-tuning this method, his body was sure to break down, and there was no guarantee that the core would necessarily split after all this abuse. In the end, Eugene didn't dare to give it another attempt. In only 6 years after he had first started training his mana, he had already risen to the 5th star of the white flame formula. Even in the Lionheart clan, this was an unprecedented rate of growth. Amongst the current elders, the highest level of the white flame formula that any of them had reached was the 7th star. In the generation below the elders, the patriarch and his younger brother were on the 6th star. Then there was Eugene, who was on the 5th star. He was still only 19 years old, and apart from his accomplishments in the white flame formula, he was also capable of far too many things. Moreover, he was sure to become even more capable in the future. Barong. Eugene recalled the beast folk who had attacked them. During these past 2 days, Eugene had been trying to figure out the conspiracy that he was entangled in. He was a member of the beast folk sworn to the demon king of destruction. Son of Oberon, sworn brother to Jagan. Objectively speaking, Barong had been strong. If he hadn't used ignition, Eugene would have found it difficult to guarantee his victory over such an opponent. WNUD, Asphal, Pernoa, and Carbos. Only by using all of these weapons, supplementing them with his magic, and even drawing the Moonlight Sword on top of that, would Eugene have barely been able to pull off a win. In other words, this meant that Barong was an opponent that the current Eugene could just barely eke a win over. Eugene had clear memories of just how strong Oberon was. 300 years ago, the Demon King of Fury had 4 heavenly kings serving under him. Despite not sharing a single drop of blood with him, they had been treated as Fury's children. The chief of the giants, Earthshaker Kamash. Vampire Lord, Bloodshedder Sane. The madman of the beast folk, Depraved Oberon. Princess of the Dark Elves, Rakshasa Iris. They were all strong warriors. The physically largest of all of them had been defeated by Vermouth and Hamel after they joined their strengths. Sane had also been defeated by them, but Oberon and Iris had managed to escape with the help of the Demon King of Fury. Jagan was an unfilial bastard who had ripped out the throat of his own father. But the fact that this feat was even possible meant that Jagan had to be at least as strong as Oberon. Barong had been strong, but he wasn't strong enough to be worthy of someone calling themselves Jagan's sworn brother. He did say that this has nothing to do with Jagan, Eugene recalled. So it wasn't because of Jagan's orders that Barong had been searching for the elven territory. While he couldn't fully trust those words for now, Eugene decided to act as if he believed them. Rather than distrusting Barong's words unconditionally, he would take them at face value for the time being, while he tried to narrow down who the traitor might be. From which side had their information been leaked? Christina had said that it was probably not the Holy Empire. Although Eugene hadn't been given a detailed explanation for this, the Holy Empire wouldn't see any benefit from arranging for the saint and the hero to be killed at the same time. However, what about the Lionheart clan? And by the Lionheart clan, Eugene meant the head of the council, Doyne's Lionheart. Such a person could see the benefits of pruning an overly talented foster child who was disturbing the family's order. Although this choice couldn't really be said to be in the clan's best interest, if Eugene had died, the issue of who would become the successor to the patriarch of the Lionheart clan would have become very, very smooth. And what else would such an outcome mean to the clan? It would mean that the clan's hierarchy had been restored. Eugene wasn't an idiot either. He knew that as a child from a distant collateral line who had been taken as a foster child of the main family, he would be seen as a rival to the heirs of the direct line. Even if he didn't actually become the patriarch, Eugene's very existence could serve as a rallying point for all the collateral bloodlines. The Lionheart clan's main family wouldn't tolerate such an outcome. For the past 300 years, the clan had made sure that the direct line had maintained its superior position, while all the collateral lines were treated as inferiors. "I'm not just any ordinary collateral descendant," Eugene thought without any self-inflation. The head of the council had always maintained a firm grasp over the main family's authority. For someone like him, more than the fact that Eugene was a collateral descendant, it would be much more irritating to see Eugene being publicly recognized as the hero by the Holy Empire and its saint. In the history of the Lionheart clan, the only one to have ever been certified as a hero by the Holy Empire by its saint, and with a revelation from the God of Light, was the founder of the clan, the Great Vermouth. A foster child from a collateral line had actually received the same accolade as their founding ancestor. He had even received the approval of the Holy Sword. Furthermore, Eugene was also aware that the founding ancestor's coffin had been empty. So there were plenty of reasons for Doins to want to kill him. The Holy Empire was wary of drawing the Demon King's attention, so they had yet to announce that Eugene was the new hero. If Eugene and Christina were killed, then they wouldn't ever be able to reveal that the founding ancestor's tomb was empty. But this wasn't something that Doins could arrange personally, so he may have colluded with the demon folk. If their relationship was secure enough for Doins to make such a large request of them, this meant that their collusion had been going on for a long time. The head of the council was in cahoots with the demon folk. "I can't be too certain," Eugene reminded himself while looking down at his own fist. The blood vessels in his fist, which had been unconsciously clenched for quite some time, were twitching. After all, it might not be the head of the council. As such, Eugene had to keep his silence for now. Was he strong enough to storm the Black Lion Castle alone, subdue the head of the council and uncover the truth? That was impossible. The nickname of the head of the council, Doins Lionheart, was Immortal White Lion. He was a character who had been around for over 100 years. "If I come back alive and in good condition, the bastard behind this conspiracy will be forced into taking further action." The reason why Eugene had decided to keep his silence was because Barang's mission wasn't just to kill him and Christina. That was just a secondary purpose. That beast's first goal was to confirm the location of the Elven territory. For that reason he had trailed behind Eugene from the very beginning without attacking them. Eugene pondered. What reason could the head of the council have for being interested in the Elven territory? He couldn't think of anything. Could it be that Doins also wanted to find Sienna? Well, it seemed that just about everyone had some desire to find out where Sienna had disappeared. But no. Eugene shook his head. The one who had really wanted to find the Elven territory had to be the Demon King behind Barang. Which, in this case, was the Demon King of Destruction. Eugene had no desire to recall that name or the figure associated with it. In his previous life, there was just one occasion where he had seen the Demon King of Destruction. Even then they hadn't come face to face, instead having spotted him while he was moving from a distant location. No, had it just seemed like he was moving? Had he really just been standing still? Eugene couldn't feel any certainty. The Demon King of Destruction was just such an existence. Eugene had only ever seen him that once, but everyone who had been there had shared the same gut feeling. That wasn't something that they could fight. That wasn't something that they stood any chance of resisting. That was something incomprehensible. The Demon King of Destruction was a uniquely strong and bizarre existence even amongst the 5 Demon Kings. They had only seen him that once, but everyone had immediately understood this fact. Killing the other Demon Kings was nothing more than a step forward in their goal to eventually reach the Demon King of Destruction, and their battle with him would be the final decisive battle of the war. The beast folk have sworn their service to the Demon King of Destruction, Eugene recalled. The Demon King of Destruction was undoubtedly bizarre, but he wasn't one for solitude. Even back 300 years ago the Demon King of Destruction had had quite a few vassals. However, even in his avoidance of solitude he still proved to be bizarre. Demon kings were all able to grant their vassals power through various different methods. As one received this power from a demon king, their soul was mortgaged to the demon king. This form of contract was the same as the one used by the ordinary demon folk. The demon king of destruction did accept vassals, but he didn't grant them the power that could be obtained from their contracts with the demon king. So his vassals weren't forced to mortgage their souls to the demon king of destruction. That said, it didn't mean that their contracts were useless. Just being able to become a vassal of the supreme demon king, who ranked first in strength among all demon kings, was something special. In addition to this, their contracts with the demon king of destruction marked them with an imprint that also gave them the knowledge of how to control demonic power. However, such an imprint gave a set amount of knowledge on how to control demonic power, only up to a certain extent. In other words, it was of limited value to other demon folk or black wizards. If they were going to sign a contract, even if it meant having to mortgage their souls, it was better for them to sign a contract with the demon king of incarceration, who could promise a huge amount of power in return. Something else that was clear was that the demon king of destruction wasn't focused on governing his vassals like the demon king of incarceration was. He didn't have much of a master-servant relationship with his vassals. This bizarre demon king didn't really meddle in the affairs of his vassals, much less anything else in the world. If the demon king of destruction is taking an interest in Sienna, why wait until now? For now, Eugene stopped trying to figure out what kind of conspiracy was going on. All that he could do at this point was make guesses. He needed more information. He needed to know what kind of position Barung, who had claimed to be Jagan's sworn brother, had held amongst the other beast folk and who he had been connected with. He also needed to know what kind of rumors were circulating about the Raizakia staying in the Dragon Demon Castle. "Are your preparations done?" Eugene asked the crowd. Over 100 elves had gathered in the center of the village. The elves who had been injured in Barang's attack 2 days ago had all been healed by Christina's holy magic. This meant that all the elves were able to move on their own 2 feet. "They are," Signard confirmed. Signard had also received the same treatment as the others. But the expressions of the elves, including him, weren't all that relieved. From now on, they would be leaving the village that they had lived in for so long and would be forced to cross the hostile rainforest. If they managed to arrive at their destination, they would have a much better life than the one that they had in this village. But most of the elves still feared that this journey would end in failure. "How's your body?" Eugene asked. Signard hummed. The biggest problem that they faced was that several of the elves were infected with the demonic disease. Although the demonic disease wouldn't progress any further so long as they lived in this forest, if they were unlucky, they could die from the demonic disease as soon as they left it. "It seems fine," Signard replied after some hesitation. Among the elves, the one with the most advanced case of the demonic disease was Signard, so he had been given a long branch to hold in his hand. No, he wasn't just holding it. Signard was reverently supporting the branch with both hands, as if he was serving as its vase or pedestal. This was the tree branch that Eugene had cut off the world tree. Since the barriers of the village were maintained by the saplings that sprouted off the world tree, Eugene thought that branches cut from the world tree might have a similar effect. Fortunately, it seemed that things had worked out just as he'd been expecting. "It feels so comfortable, as if I've finally returned home," Signard muttered. Eugene asked him bluntly, "Isn't that just an illusion on your part? Are you sure you're comfortable?" "I'm sure of it," Signard stated confidently. "Although it's only a branch. I can feel the warmth of home coming from this." "Is it something like the taste of your mom's stew?" Eugene asked curiously. "Why would a branch taste like stew?" Signard scoffed. "Why would a branch feel like home?" Eugene shot back as he drew WYD. "I've confirmed it. The spirit of the world tree does reside in that branch. If that's the case, doesn't that mean we can use Signard as a moving barrier?" "A moving barrier? What? I'm right, aren't I?" That certainly seems to be the case. You're right, Hamel. The demonic disease won't be able to progress in an area around that elf. Is it impossible to purify the disease completely? Well, if it's not the world tree itself, then I can't say for sure. After all, that's still just a branch. Tempest pondered this question for a few moments before continuing to speak. "However, if you plant that branch and those saplings together in your family's estate, they might one day be able to grow into a giant tree capable of purifying the elves of the demonic disease. That will take quite a while, Eugene grumbled to himself with a sigh as he walked over to the saplings of the world tree. There were 3 saplings in total. He had thought about placing them inside of his cloak, but he might cause the saplings to dry out and die. As such, he had no choice but to pull them out of the ground, roots and all, and take them with him. To think that you're using such a barbaric method. What about it? Eugene asked defensively. It consumes a whole lot less mana to just uproot them and lift them in the air with your wind, than it would to make the ground flow like a river and carry the saplings. It's only thanks to me that the mana consumption of the first method is so low. Aha, thanks a lot. Eugene pacified Tempest and swung W. A strong wind was called that uprooted the 3 saplings. As such, a bizarre spectacle was created. From now on, Eugene would have to cross the forest with 3 trees floating above his head and leading more than 100 elves behind him. How tiresome, Eugene complained to himself. He couldn't just carry the trees around with him either. Each time they had to take a break, the trees would also need to be replanted and given time to recover so that they didn't wither. The fairy trees that grew solely in Samar were strong enough that they wouldn't die so easily, and they even had the branch of the world tree with them, so it was unlikely that they would truly wither and die, but better safe than sorry. I'm already getting all impatient, Eugene muttered as his brows furrowed and he placed a hand inside of his cloak. When the saplings were uprooted, the barrier that had protected the village completely disappeared. 2 days ago, Barong had attacked the village by breaking through the barrier using his brute force. Immediately afterwards he had fought with Eugene and had even been driven to commit suicide. The loud explosion that Barong had created with his death had caused enough of a fuss to attract the attention of the nearby tribes. It was likely due to the barrier having been broken, but they had noticed that this place seemed to have something to do with the village of the Wandering Elves. As a result, quite a lot of the natives had gathered in the surrounding forest. Eugene had no intention of trying to negotiate with them. No matter what he tried, their group couldn't help but stand out, and unless he was willing to give up on the elves, they would continue to be attacked. Eugene had finished the last of his tasks in this forest. Since he had already been exposed, there wasn't any need to keep being so careful. Eugene took out a bow from his cloak. The bow named Thunderbolt Pernoa shone with a golden light. With its huge size, it couldn't be compared with an ordinary bow. Eugene held the bow that was as tall as he was in one hand and aimed it at the sky. He had now reached the 5th star of the White Flame formula. Although it had only been an increase of 1 star, Eugene's mana had doubled from what it had been before. The use of Thunderbolt consumed even more mana than the Dragon Spear, but as he was now, Eugene was able to use the bow without much of a burden. Cover your ears, Eugene warned them in advance. The elves, who were filled with worries about their future, turned to look at Eugene. If it was in the past, they might not have followed his warning. However, the elves had seen Eugene fighting with Barong. They had seen the overwhelming power with which Eugene had defeated that terrifying invader. Yes, they quickly acquiesced. The elves no longer doubted Eugene. And among the elves, Nerissa and Lavera in particular looked at Eugene with an admiration that went beyond trust, even as they covered their ears as he had instructed. Are you planning on killing all of them? Signard asked. Do you really see me as such a butcher? Eugene retorted with a smirk as he spread his arms. The bow didn't appear to have a string, but as he bent his fingers, a thin strand of light appeared in the place of the bowstring and was caught by his fingers. For now, I'll just give them a warning shot, Eugene stated. Buzz buzz. An electric current flowed through the taut bowstring. If they still chase after us after this. Eugene's mana, amplified by the ring flame formula, was converted into lightning. Then, well, it can't be helped. His fingers released the bowstring. A small lightning bolt was shot up into the sky. Soon after, a huge lightning bolt landed in the distance. Chapter 114, Forest 1. Well, pat. The man patted Eugene's back with his large hand. In his own way, he was showing affection, but his hand was so barbarically large that his light pat was enough to shake Eugene's entire body. See you later, buddy, the man said. Who says that I'm your buddy? After balancing his body, Eugene looked sharply at him. His eyes were somewhat sharp, but he didn't look so threatening. Due to glaring ever since he was a baby, only his eyes looked threatening, and he was objectively handsome, very handsome. A frowning handsome kid wasn't enough to intimidate the man. That was understandable. The man himself looked very intimidating. Black tattoos covered his brown-colored body. There were also several scars on his face. Therefore, no matter how hard Eugene frowned, it was nothing compared to the man's smiling face. It wasn't just this man. Dozens of natives behind the man all had threatening appearances and sizes. Zoran tribe, they were one of the biggest tribes in Samar. The man beside Eugene was a young heir of the Zoran tribe. Judging from his looks, it was hard to believe that he was young. However, the man was surprisingly 19 years old, the same age as Eugene. We are buddies because we shared the drink. I only drank it because you were hell-bent on making me drink it. Grumbling, Eugene turned his head away. He had met the Zoran tribe a month ago, not long after leaving the Elven sanctuary. When Eugene was done shooting out lightning using the thunderbolt bow, he and the elves departed right away. These not-so-intelligent natives were taken aback, because thunder struck the ground like rain. Still, they rushed in for the elves' great migration, drooling. Eugene took out a lot of natives, really a lot. In the beginning he hadn't been planning on killing them, but he found that he could not go easy on them. If he did not make them fear him, then the number of attackers would only increase and they would keep coming at him. This was going to be one hell of a journey. On the first day of their journey he took out nearly 100 natives. The timing for their departure had turned out to be rather terrible. There was a slave market nearby and many tribal warriors participated in it. For them, chasing and hunting 100 elves was just a fun after-party. Eugene expected the ambush to continue all night. To prepare, he discussed with Christina about using the World Tree's sapling to put up a barrier and keep an eye on things and maybe calling for backup. Ivatar, the heir of Zoran, came to visit. Eugene noticed that other tribes were blatantly tiptoeing around Ivatar, so instead of blindly attacking, Eugene welcomed Ivatar for the time being. You are strong. 1. After introducing himself and his tribe, Ivatar grinned and offered his hand. I know what flame you are wearing. So what? Are you going to take advantage or something? If I do so, then I will lose many Zoran warriors. Ivatar didn't seem hostile. Those elves, are they your slaves? No, they aren't. Then what are you doing? I'm going to take them out of this fucking forest. Where are you taking them? To the Lionheart territory. So if I help you, then I help Lionheart. Ivatar didn't even ask for Eugene's permission. When Ivatar signaled to his warriors, they planted Zoran flags around the camp. That was it. The Samar natives were more scared of Zoran than of an outsider who threw flashes of lightning, stirred up a storm and shot out God knew what. Ivatar and the Zoran warriors became their volunteer guards for a month, throughout the journey across the Samar rainforest. Just traveling with them was enough to make other tribes not attack anymore. I will visit Lionheart someday. I told you this several times, but I haven't asked you to do this, Eugene replied. It doesn't change the fact that Zoran helped you. During their trip, Eugene talked with Ivatar about many things. Samar natives did not like the Keel Empire. For them, the Keel Empire was just an invader that entered the rainforest without permission, ruined the forest as they pleased, and kept trying to make the forest a part of their land. Most tribes would think that way, but it was different with the great tribes. It wasn't an exaggeration to call the great tribes, located deep in the big rainforest, small countries. A tribe of that size usually became involved with various parties, and that applied to the Zoran tribe too. Eugene Lionheart. Even if you don't become the patriarch, Lionheart will not be able to ignore your presence and power, Ivatar said. When Eugene had first met Ivatar, the latter had reminded Eugene of Molan. They looked nothing alike, but they were both muscular giants and didn't speak the common language very well. I want to become your friend for that reason. We are same age and strong. It won't be bad for you to become friends with me. It turned out that they were different after all. Ivatar was smarter than Molan. I think you actually benefited, didn't you? If I did not protect you and the elves, you would not have arrived here today. Then would I have died midway? Ha! You are not. You are strong. But, you Signard, Christina wouldn't have been able to protect 100 elves without a scar. Ivatar guffawed and slapped Eugene's back. It will be very difficult. It will take longer to get here and you will become very tired. Eugene didn't deny it. It was the undeniable truth that Ivatar and Zoran warriors made the journey really comfortable. Without them, Eugene's group would have had to stop and shut themselves inside the barrier. If they tried to call for backup, the journey would have become longer as they would have been forced to travel back and forth. I'm not asking you for something materialistic, Ivatar said as he smiled. Someday when I visit the Lionheart mansion. I just hope you will greet me as your guest. That I can do. Eugene also believed that it was good to make an alliance with Ivatar. He wasn't sure if he was going to visit Samar in the future, but there was no harm in becoming friends with the heir of a grand tribe. I can also understand their situation. Helmuth supported the Samar natives' freedom. The reason why the Kiel Empire couldn't just send the army to conquer Samar was that several countries including Helmuth were holding the Kiel Empire in check. As such, there were some tribes that directly made exchanges with the demon folk in Helmuth. The most powerful tribe of all was the Coachella tribe. They were the biggest tribe in the Samar rainforest and also ruled over several nearby tribes. Considering its size, it would have been natural for many rumors about the Coachella tribe to exist, but there weren't any. It was partially due to their land being the backwoods of backwoods, and partially due to the fact that the tribe was excessively secluded. They never participated in the slave market when most tribes did, and apart from the tribes they ruled over, they never made exchanges with anyone. Eugene didn't think Coachella or a Helmuth-affiliated tribe was behind Barong, but he had to stay on guard since Helmuth was involved. He didn't say that aloud in front of Ivatar. It wasn't a bad thing to make an alliance with the Zoran tribe, but Eugene didn't trust Ivatar yet. He benefited from Ivatar and the Zoran tribe during their journey, but it was too soon to trust them. I don't care about visiting, but don't smuggle yourself in. If you are going to come over, go through the proper channels and send me a letter before you do. I do have common sense, Ivatar guffawed. Ancilla Keynes, the Lionheart Patriarch's second wife, started her morning early. She usually woke up before daybreak, but she did not head out of the room straight away. Although her husband, Gilead, and her lovely children weren't in the main house right now, she wanted to maintain her dignity as the second mistress of the prestigious Lionheart house. She had to always look perfect. She especially could never show others her shabby face after she woke up. That was why Ancilla began to prepare all by herself without the servant's help right after she woke up. She took a bath, dried and combed her hair, did her makeup and chose her outfit for the day. Although she had no plans to go outside and no expected guests either, that did not prevent her from doing her best to appear decent. After hours of preparation, the sun finally rose. If the patriarch and her children had been in the house, she would have had breakfast with them. However, there were only Ancilla and Gerhard there right now. She didn't want to appear hostile and she made sure she was on good terms with him. Still, eating alone with him was rather awkward. Gerhard also felt the same way, so they rarely shared the same table. Today's morning was just like a usual morning. Gerhard in the annex and Ancilla in the main house. With a servant accompanying her, Ancilla sat in front of the table and smelled the coffee in her cup. A cup of coffee without a single grain of sugar and a plate of fresh salad were in front of her. The dignity Ancilla pursued included looks. The clean diet and steady exercise were part of her efforts to show dignity as the second wife of the Lionheart Patriarch. She didn't only value appearance, however. While the patriarch was away, Ancilla managed all affairs in the main house, particularly the social events. There were a lot of parties during the new year. There was a party hosted by Marquis Ragos next week. The invitation said the party was to celebrate the new year, but Ancilla knew that the party was actually about showing off Ragos's power. It wasn't rare for nobles to do this. Most high-ranking nobles' parties were about showing off their power. The nobles kept each other in check by showing off in terms of both party fanciness and guests' ranks. They also revised their relationships by checking who refused the invitations and who went to whose party. Marquis Ragos and Count Birid are having their parties on the same date. They are being very obvious, Ancilla snorted. She received the invitations from both of them. As the most prestigious house in the Kiel, the continent, the Lionheart clan could participate in any party. The hosts were the ones who were fretting about Lionheart's attendance. Which party shall I attend? Ancilla joyfully wondered and turned over the report after checking the guest list. In this report there was a lot of information aside from the party. It was about the various rumors regarding Lionheart's collateral descendants, from who got married and gave birth to children to Pooh. Ancilla spat out the fragrant coffee in her mouth. The shocked servant approached, but Ancilla couldn't care about the servant and her dignity as the second wife. What's up with this report? Ancilla sprang right up from her seat, shuddering. She went through the coffee-stained report multiple times. Feeling dizzy, she collapsed back onto the chair. What in the world is up with him? What has he done? The report also included Eugene's whereabouts and status. Yesterday Eugene had come back through the Kiel Empire's south gate. That alone was enough to astound Ancilla. When had he left Kiel in the first place? She knew that Eugene had left the Black Lion Knight's castle. She did not know his exact destination, but she had assumed that it was somewhere in the Kiel Empire. However, the report said Eugene had arrived at the Empire through the south gate. The Samar rainforest. Why Samar? That wasn't it either. Right up to the south gate, Eugene had been escorted by the Great Zoran tribe, one of the most powerful tribes in Samar. And elves. She had no idea why Eugene got involved with the Samar's barbarians in the first place, but now Eugene had also brought 100 elves and 3 trees floating above their heads? And trees. Ancilla pinched her thigh, wondering if she was dreaming. It hurt, which meant this wasn't a dream. This unbelievable report was all true. Eugene had been escorted by Samar natives, leading 100 elves with 3 trees floating above their heads. In front of the public he had passed through the gate, stayed the night in the southern city, and arrived this morning at the Warp Gate in the capital Ceres. The report was too ridiculous. Ancilla belatedly came to her senses and first wiped the coffee on her mouth with the handkerchief. The carriage, bring the carriage. Lady Ancilla. The mansion's butler hurriedly approached Ancilla. We received a message from the Warp Gate. What message? The Warp Gate in Ceres is requesting to be connected. For whom? Master Eugene, my lady. Hunching his shoulder, the butler answered. Ancilla moaned as she held on to her head. What on earth is with that child? Pardon? I haven't received reports about him heading to Samar, so why is he coming from Samar? What is up with the elves? He didn't just bring 1 or 2 elves but 100 of them? Where on earth did he bring those elves from in the first place? Of course Samar. Why did he bring 100 elves from Samar? Why did he have trees floating above his head? Why is he doing those things in the open? Why would he volunteer to be a clown? I'm not sure. Let them do what they want. After yelping, Ancilla collapsed on her seat again. Prepare the carriage. Are you going to meet him? Then shall I not meet him? Shall I not connect the warp gate and just ask him to walk? Regretting his question, the butler lowered his head without answering. How could he do that? That boy, mischievous boy. As she caught her breath, Ancilla clenched her fists. Oh my. After pouring out her anger on the butler, Ancilla gently smiled at Eugene, who passed the gate. This is unexpected. Are they your friends? She was burning up inside. Still, she couldn't show it to Eugene. 7 years had passed since Eugene had become an adopted son of the main house, and Ancilla had never lost her composure in front of Eugene in all this time. Oh my, you brought so many friends. Are you angry? Eugene saw Ancilla's eyes twitch. Oh no, angry. Why would I be angry? There's nothing to be mad about bringing friends. I think you are angry, Eugene thought. Ancilla spoke too kindly. Eugene threw a glance at the servants and knights behind Ancilla. He met the eyes of Hazard, the captain of the 2nd Division. Hazard slightly hunched his shoulder and moved his lips. They aren't friends, Eugene said after glancing back. Including Signard, 100 elves were standing behind him. Then, who are they? Families. Families. Eugene, I'm not sure what you are talking about right now. Ancilla held up her feather fan to hide the twitching corner of her mouth. They are more of neighbors than families. You lost me. Isn't the main house's forest wide? Eugene asked innocently. The forest is wide. Has many trees. And what are the trees over your head? I'm going to plant them in the forest. Aren't there a lot of them already? Why those trees specifically? Is there a reason for you to bring some trees floating above your head? These are expensive and rare trees. That is nice. So what do the elves have to do with the wide forest? I'm going to let them live in the forest, Eugene said as he awkwardly smiled. The fan in Ancilla's hand was crushed. Chapter 115, Forest 2. Although Ancilla was the 2nd mistress of the main family, she could not control her daring adopted son. It may have been possible when Eugene was young and he had just been adopted, but now Eugene was an adult. For a long time Ancilla had properly faced reality. Her biological children, the twins, were truly outstanding prodigies. If she hadn't met Eugene, she may have thought her children were geniuses, like any other mother would have. However, she had met Eugene, so she could no longer think the twins were that great geniuses. Fortunately, the child didn't wish to become the patriarch. If anything, he rather loathed the idea of becoming the patriarch. Thus, there was no reason for her to be hostile toward him. As such, ever since Eugene had become her adopted son, Ancilla had tried to be on good terms with him. She had also coaxed Cyan, who had been caught in his immaturity and ego. Then she had reasoned with the curious, mischievous seal so that she wouldn't provoke Eugene too much. Ancilla herself tried not to provoke him for that matter. Cyan and Seal had ended up becoming close with Eugene. Although they were related by little blood, the three had become true siblings. Cyan had turned his inferiority complex into a desire to improve himself. Instead of hating Eugene, who was better than him, Cyan yearned for him and wanted to follow in Eugene's footsteps. It was also similar for Seal. She didn't have a massive inferiority complex like Cyan, but she had definitely been motivated by Eugene and Cyan. She didn't try to slack off in her training. All the while, Seal was conscious of Eugene in a different way than Cyan. In Ancilla's eyes, their relationship was very peaceful and satisfying. Eugene wouldn't become the patriarch in the end. Even Seal had chosen to join the Black Lion instead of competing with her biological older brother to become the patriarch. Cyan was trying his best to become a person who could live up to the title of the patriarch, trying to use the things that were conceded to him. Ancilla didn't want to do anything to ruin this desirable dynamic. What if that daring child changed his mind when she acted unfriendly? Cough. Ancilla cleared her throat and fidgeted with her fingers. Her crushed fan swung in the air, a terribly pathetic sight. Their stories, I am sorry to hear that. The fact that elves were persecuted for their natural beauty and longevity was famous. To be honest, Ancilla felt sorry for the elves. To die from the demonic disease that only affected elves, to wander around the rainforest because they couldn't go back to their home, to be hunted by slave traders and Samar natives, to be sold as slaves. Well, there is no harm in taking them in. Wouldn't it be a chance for the Lionheart to gain more status? Ancilla quickly thought about it. As far as she knew, there was no house that sheltered that many elves on the continent. Is there anything that I could do to help? I won't bother you, Lady Ancilla. It was already bothersome enough. She tried to see this incident in a positive light, but she couldn't. Now the elves were a little over 100, but wouldn't their number increase over time? The more troubling matter was that she could not even use those elves as servants of the main house. They would just live in the forest. In the end, she understood. She had to. Well, there were a lot of questions she wanted to ask. She now knew why Eugene had gone to Samar Rainforest without letting anyone know about his destination. He had been trying to look for the elven sanctuary where Sienna the Wise had secluded herself. That is a very important matter. Why would you be the one to do it? And why did you do it with just 2 people? On top of that, his female companion was none other than Christina Rogerus, the saint candidate of the Holy Empire. Christina was standing so naturally beside Eugene right now that it confused Ancilla more. Eugene had gone to the Black Lion's castle for his coming-of-age ceremony, so how had he ended up in the Samar rainforest to find Sienna the Wise out of the blue? Had only the 2 of them gone together? In the end, Ancilla didn't pry any further. Holding down the sighs that were about to burst out of her, she nodded. Still, I have to help with something. I will summon the workers to build some houses in the forest. Until then, doesn't the annex that I use have many empty rooms? I will just tell them to stay in the annex until then. If they say they don't like it because it's uncomfortable, then I will let them stay on their own in the forest. What about their meals? I will tell Nina to take care of it. 7 years ago, Nina had just finished her apprenticeship as a maid, but now she was overseeing the servants in the annex. That means the Lionheart clan still has to feed them, right? Did he know? Everything that happened in the estate, whether in the main halls or the annex, went through Ancilla. Of course, Eugene knew that. Well, the Lionheart clan is filthy rich anyway. He didn't give a hoot. It's a nice forest. After Ancilla returned, Signard finally spoke his mind. He nodded as he took a look around the vast Lionheart forest. The trees, the earth, everything is well managed. It's a forest. I really like that it doesn't smell unpleasant. Unpleasant smell? Smell of blood, Signard answered as he laughed. It always smelled like blood in Samar rainforest. I often heard screams there, but this place is peaceful and nice. It had to be. After all, this forest was included in the main house's estate. There were no barbarians who indulged in territorial disputes. There were no monsters. Many animals freely roamed the land, but there were no predators who could destroy the forest's ecosystem. Since it was winter, there weren't many leaves on the trees either. Nevertheless, the forest was peaceful and beautiful. There is also plenty of mana. Sigurd turned his head toward the far end of the forest. It's the Lionheart's ley line. Was that always there? It is said that the great Vermouth made it. As Eugene said so, he signaled something to Sigurd. Eugene had said that dozens of times to Sigurd before they had gotten here, to watch his mouth. Sigurd knew Eugene was Hamel. That was why Sigurd needed to be careful. I see. The great Vermouth. The corner of Sigurd's mouth twitched as Eugene spoke. If they had been alone, Sigurd would have definitely teased him, but he couldn't do so now. There were other elves and there was also Christina. Let's pick the place to settle down first. Eugene led the way and entered the forest. For a second he thought the location didn't matter, but it soon became apparent that it wasn't the case. Go a little bit deeper. Are you sure? Sure. The World Tree's spirit wishes for a deeper, denser and livelier place. Tempest's voice was echoing inside his head. He could feel and communicate with the World Tree's spirit in the seedling, guiding Eugene to find the place that the spirit wanted. This place will do. The wind likes this place. This place is... Eugene took a look around, feeling odd. The Lionheart ley line was nearby. He had visited this place when he was 13 years old, as he had started to sense mana there. Staring at the faraway hut, Eugene touched Wmoidy's handle on his waist. It's close to the ley line. Does it mean anything special? Something must be special. Like I said before, a primal spirit is another form of mana. The World Tree's spirit was basically a primal spirit. As Eugene listened to Tempest, he tried to be conscious of the wind, but he couldn't feel anything. It was understandable. The wind just naturally existed. No matter how great the spirit summoner was, it was impossible to perfectly control a primal spirit that didn't have a form. The primal spirits of wind, earth, water, and fire allowed the elements to hold a form, and the elements imbued the spirits with power. The Samar natives who were born and raised in the forest received help and protection from the primal spirits, and so did the elves. Still, they merely received help from the primal spirits. They didn't control, much less dominate them. This ley line is not natural. Vermouth made it, so the mana in that ley line is artificially distorted. It was unbelievable, but Vermouth had actually pulled it off. Tempest became a gust of wind and hovered around Eugene. Hamel. You must know this too, but the mana in that artificial ley line isn't infinite. Mana existed everywhere in the world, and a ley line held an overwhelmingly large amount of mana. So it wasn't infinite. If a person trained their mana in ley line, they could progress at a fast pace. However, if someone stayed for too long in the ley line, the mana in the ley line would be eventually depleted. That was why the Lionheart's ley line was under strict management. If you plant the seedling of the World Tree in this land, that ley line will become more complete. Are you saying mana in this region will increase? I guess so. Eugene also knew that a ley line was convenient. However, the more he mastered mana, the less he would benefit from the ley line. The cores weren't something that could be strengthened with just a lot of mana. Any ordinary ley line will benefit from this. The World Tree in the Elven Sanctuary came to Eugene's mind. The mana in the sanctuary was almost non-existent, but there was more mana inside the World Tree than in any other places Eugene remembered. I made a good choice bringing them here, Eugene suddenly murmured. What are you talking about? Sigurd asked back. To imagine that you guys are going to live happily in this forest after going through all those fucking hardships. My heart is deeply touched. Eugene made up excuses. His excuses touched the hearts of Sigurd and the elves. Eugene stirred up the wind and hastily cleared the uneven land. After that, he dug a hole in the spot Tempest designated and planted the seedlings and branches of the World Tree. Nothing is happening. Eugene was about to bring this up, but he was shocked by an abrupt change. He bent down and stroked the ground with his hands. He could feel a faint warmth in this dry, cold land. There was also a slight tremor. The roots of the seedlings spread far and deep into the earth, while their branches energetically stretched wide. Their leaves became more alive. The branches from the World Tree itself lightly wavered too. Elves exclaimed to the sight. They heard the forest's joyous voice. Along with Signard, the elves born in the sanctuary saw the grand world tree in the small seedlings and branches. Some elves shed tears as they couldn't hold back their thrill anymore. Indeed. Christina expressed her admiration in a low voice and brought her hands in front of the chest. These things are the true miracles. These miracles weren't done by your God. Yes, I am aware of that. However, a revelation of God led us here. Not all miracles are done by the God of light himself, but every miracle holds light. Glaring at the smiling Christina, Eugene shook his head. The mana doesn't seem to be increasing right away. After some time passes, the ley line will also begin to change. It's meaningless if it takes too long. You don't have to worry about such stuff. You won't be able to feel this, but the primal spirit in this land is answering to the world tree. Does it mean there will be more of the world tree's spirit? Yes, this forest in the estate will soon turn into the most beautiful and lively forest on this continent. Elves will live on in this forest and look after everything in this forest. The earth, the trees, the forest. They will also harmonize with the world tree's spirit, and that way the number of fairy trees will increase. As they grow, the entire forest will turn into a ley line. Yes, the forest will turn into a ley line. The Lionheart's ley line will bear far more vast mana than before. I guess I won't have to hire any more forest keepers or landscapers. What? You said so yourself. The elves will tend to the forest. I am a human, so I thought it was a bit too much to ask them to earn their keep. Well, if they do the landscaping, then that sorts out the problem. Hamel. What? I'm right, do you have any idea how wide this forest is? I can't just let the forest be, it needs to be pruned and grafted each season. Anyhow, there are a lot of things to be done. If the elves do those on their own. Tempest shut his mouth. Here, listen up. Eugene gathered the thrilled elves in one place. We got permission from Lady Ancilla and planted the trees. He talked casually to Signard, but he couldn't do that to the other elves. I may not have to even say these things, but you are not allowed to leave the estate. If you really wish to, then inform the Lionheart servants beforehand. I won't say you can never go out, but wouldn't it be tiring for all of us if you get into a quarrel outside? Hunting elves was illegal and the capital series was pretty safe. Still, there was always that if. I will tell the Lionheart Knights to accompany you when you wish to go out of the estate, and the servants will provide the necessities. Please show your hands if you don't want to live here and want to seek freedom otherwise. No elves raised their hands. Yeah, of course you do. I don't care what you do in the forest, but do you see the cabin over there? Don't go there ever, Eugene emphasized, pointing at the ley line. If you go there, I will get angry. And another thing, you will come across the knights, servants, and other workers of Lionhearts as you stay in this forest. Don't look down on them or pick a fight. Do you need to mention it? Signard asked, glaring at Eugene. It's not like before. Eugene glared back. Signard cleared his throat and continued. Elven elitism was a given 300 years ago, but not now. The elves are in a difficult position. Not all elves are like that, aren't they? Eugene asked. But the elves here fear humans, so they won't look down on them. You have a point. Then to the next matter. Probably starting tomorrow, people will come and build a village for you guys. Where do you guys wish to stay before it's completed? Signard took the lead and gathered the elves' opinions. Most elves want to stay in the forest, but some say they want to go to the annex. Is that so? Eugene, do you live in that annex? I live there, and my father lives there. There are some elves who used to be servants. They wish to repay you by serving you. Serve me? Eugene said with a sour face. 10 elves stepped forward. The one-legged Nerissa and the one-eyed Lavera were among them. Were you a servant? Some thing like that, Nerissa answered. Do you know how to clean? I do know how. It was a lie. She had stayed in a mansion when she was a slave, but she had never cleaned anything. Still, she could do it if she tried. Feeling the groundless confidence rising up, Nerissa clenched her fists. What about cooking? I think I can learn. Lavera had never cooked anything. I am confident when it comes to eating. This wasn't a lie. In her days of being abused as a slave, Lavera had eaten all sorts of disgusting, terrible things, then vomited and suffered to satisfy her master's sadistic desires. They said they wanted to repay Eugene by becoming his servants, so there wasn't much Eugene could say to that. Besides, training apprentice servants wasn't Eugene's job. Nina will take care of it. He didn't really care either. The desert warrior Layman Shulhov had been having an identity crisis over the past few months. The beard was a symbol of power for the desert men. The lowlifes couldn't have a beard. In Nahama, the more power the person had, the more voluminous and cool their beard. Layman's former master and emir of Kajitan, Tyree al-Madani, had a bushy beard. Layman's beard was incomparable to his, but it was pretty neat nevertheless. It was Layman's small joy in life to brush his beard using scented oil every morning. His precious beard had been shaved off on his first day in the Lionheart mansion. Since he had come to Kiel, to the Lionheart clan, he had to follow the Lionheart's law. Ironically, his new master Eugene hadn't been the one to enforce the law on Layman. The one to do it was Nina. She oversaw the servants in this annex and she didn't allow Layman to keep his beard. Her reason was simple. His beard did not match his butler outfit. Layman argued that he was a warrior, but as far as Nina was concerned, the only warriors here were the knights of the main house. Layman couldn't become a knight of the main house. Nina didn't have the authority to knight him and Eugene didn't wish to do it. In the end, Layman had become a butler. He trained from time to time, but he spent most of his day in the annex, handling the trivial works given by Nina. The cause of his identity crisis was that he unexpectedly enjoyed those works. The big master Zihard was humorous and kind. Nina was indeed hard on Layman, but she took care of him so he wouldn't have any problem living in the Lionheart house. Other servants who had first been wary of Layman because he was from Nahama, had become friendly after watching Layman working hard. He had never experienced this kind of life in Nahama. This place was peaceful and nice. There were no sandstorms, no warriors checking on him, and no suspicious conspiracy. However, Layman never let go of his pride as Eugene's right-hand man. He was working as the butler of the annex right now, but someday he would return to being a warrior and follow Eugene's lead. Eugene never said such things to Layman, but that was what the latter planned. His master had saved his life not only once but multiple times. Layman had to repay him somehow. Layman absent-mindedly stood and looked at Eugene. No, he looked at the 10 elves standing behind Eugene. The elves were so beautiful. There were both males and females, and the male elves were as beautiful as the females. You are truly something else, Master Eugene. Layman stayed silent for a moment, but then he nodded. You have an elven harem. Even the harem of my former master, Tyree al-Madani, only had one elf. What the fuck are you talking about? Eugene said as he kicked Layman's shin. Layman yelped and grabbed onto his aching shin. These guys will work here starting today. Pardon? Layman lifted his head in shock. Then what about me? What about you? If those elves work in this annex, will I become a warrior and follow you? Why do you keep speaking bullshit? Dumbstruck, Eugene stared at Layman. I brought you here because you said you wanted to tag along. That's it. You have saved my life twice, Master Eugene. As a warrior, I just wish to repay that. You can't do anything for me right now. Not with your skills, anyway. So if you want to repay me, keep working hard here, Eugene said. Layman didn't feel humiliated by Eugene's remark. I will try to be of help to Master Eugene. Layman was determined not to neglect his training as a warrior, all while faithfully carrying out his tasks as a butler.